Item 9. In your auditory excursions today, you may hear some familiar names. Rest assured, Mr. Franz and Mr. Banks are not playing their beloved, if troubled, characters from other shows. Furthermore, one Mr. Sonny Crockett bears little, if any, resemblance to Sonny Crockett of the Miami Vice Squad. Finally, don't mistake the eponymous Rico for one of your hosts. Now, let's get on with the show. And hey, let's have a good time out there.
It's a thing, man.
Battle of the Network shows. Join Rick Brooks and Mike Kogel as they explore the TV of the 70s and 80s through hand-picked episodes of their favorite and not-so-favorite series.
Welcome to another Battle of the Network shows, here with Rick.
Hey, everybody.
And today we're talking about the classic police show, Hill Street Blues, which we touched on briefly in our bonus episode about the late Stephen Bochco. I think we were always planning on talking about this at some point, but that might have motivated us to get to it a little sooner. It is all on Hulu, and
Also on DVD.
And yeah, DVD. So I think in a way you could call this sort of one of the precursors of today's prestige drama. It definitely pushed boundaries and pushed the format of the police drama and the non-soap drama, I guess. Heavily serialized, a ton of characters, a lot of chaos, and pretty fascinating, I think. I think a lot of it holds up. Now, what's your previous experience with Hill Street Blues?
Hill Street Blues was not something that I watched a lot. I think I was. I think I might have mentioned this before. I can't remember exactly if it was on the Bochco show or somewhere else, but it was one of those shows that when it was on, I was a little too young to really be motivated to watch it. And then by the time I was more motivated to watch like police dramas, especially like more adult police dramas, it wasn't on the air anymore.
Yeah.
And it's been on in reruns, but I didn't really watch it in reruns, and I wasn't staying up and watching it, Thursday nights on NBC either. So I have seen relatively little of this. Every now and then, like if somebody starts showing it in reruns, or like when it came on Hulu, I'll check it out and watch a little bit of it. But I did not grow up watching the show, so I'm kind of coming into it from more of a background of being aware of it because of how critically acclaimed it was, and the praise it has gotten for being groundbreaking. But I didn't really experience that myself when it was on.
Yeah.
So how about you?
I mean, for a lot of when it was on, I was too young to be watching it too. But I feel like I was always aware of it. Like it was being talked about enough in TV Guide or Entertainment Tonight or whatever that I had some awareness. And I think maybe the last season or two I might have watched it a little bit because I did watch Beverly Hills Bunts, and something motivated that.
Yeah.
And I think I was always curious about this show. I mean, it was a 10 p.m. show, I assume, and I don't think it was something my parents were watching. So, but I've always kind of wanted to go back and watch, maybe not all of it, but some of it. And I managed just under the wire to watch the entire season 3. So I'm well on my way, and I have watched a number of other episodes. And it's interesting just to see how many, like the writers, especially from this, went on to other things. David Milch being the obvious one, went on to NYPD Blue and then Deadwood and other things. But the season we're going to be talking about, Anthony Yerkovich, who did Miami Vice. I think this must have been his last season on there. And Dick Wolf wrote for them, and Mark Frost, who co-created Twin Peaks with David Lynch. And I think everyone else I looked up had some other credits. A few, one of them died pretty young, Michael Wagner, but he was involved in that. I think that was a Bochco thing, Capital Critters.
Ah, the animated series?
Yeah. And some other things. And so that's interesting, and it's just full of all these interesting actors that were not stars and became stars by being character actors.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that Bochco went to college not only with Barbara Bosson, his then wife, who's on there, but with Charles Hayde and Bruce Weitz. And wrote some of those roles specifically for them.
And I would say, like, most of this huge ensemble cast, would it be fair to say that this was the peak for virtually all of them?
Yeah.
I mean, Betty Thomas went on to, like, a big directing career.
Yes.
But in front of the camera, this is, the most notable role for most of them. This was kind of like their thing.
Yeah. And, I mean, they're mostly in their 30s, or maybe even older, some of them. Of course, a few passed away, but I was also impressed by how many of them were still around by the end. Like, I mean, Michael Conrad passed away in the middle of the series, and a couple other characters got killed, but I think most of the cast was there from the beginning. I don't think Betty Thomas was in the pilot, but...
And we're talking 7 seasons.
Yeah.
So that's a very impressive accomplishment for a show with that many characters to hold the core together so long.
Yeah, like a good comparison would be LA Law, and lots of people came and went on there.
Right. Or even something like ER is kind of what I think about, because it sort of was the successor years later, I guess. LA Law was kind of like a bridge maybe in there.
Yeah.
On Thursday nights, but ER was making dramatic cast changes, well before. I mean, it lasted more than 7 seasons, but it was making big cast shakeups way before it surpassed Hill Street Blues as far as number of seasons goes.
Yeah, no one, of course, on Hill Street Blues became the George Clooney level, but I could see some of them wanting to do something else or moving on, but maybe not, right? Or maybe they were just smart.
Yeah.
If they're working actors, which they were thankful to have a consistent job that was good.
Right, and I'm assuming none of them got rich off this show.
Probably not.
Yeah, especially when you're cutting up the pie among that many people.
Yeah.
And it was a different time back then. It wasn't like, I mean, Clooney could have probably named his price to do X number of episodes a year.
Yeah.
And he would have gotten it because, the actors had that kind of power in the 80s. You would have, like, holdouts and things like that, but you'd have, like, big stars doing that. More like, I guess, on a sitcom or something like this. But on this kind of show, I mean, is anybody really indispensable? I mean, that might be something that we could consider. Mm-hmm. Maybe Daniel J. Cervantes, but even then, it seems like the show could have lost him and moved on. Because you had the locale and, like, the atmosphere and the writing in the show were more the attractions.
Yeah, I think he and that character is like a center to the sort of chaos. But certainly, just based on knowing other cop shows and stuff, that some of the beat cops and the detectives and things you could think, they could be replaced, or do you need the Howard Hunter character at all? But he does serve a function, both in the police, but also on the show. But yeah, that's an interesting question. And of course, this was another MTM show, and St. Elsewhere came along not long after that, similar kind of style show, and another weird Fred Silverman NBC era show that survived partly because it was good and not because it had good ratings.
Right.
And because they were desperate, I guess they could try different things. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about other shows that maybe weren't high quality that survived for similar reasons or made it on the air even.
Yeah.
But they were also doing, this and Cheers and St. Elsewhere are the other example of these really critically acclaimed shows that were not ratings hits.
Especially like from the beginning. I was looking back in that, and I think I was under the impression that Hill Street Blues was fairly low rated almost its entire run. However, it was terrible its first year, but then became kind of a modest hit and kind of one of the building blocks for the Thursday night must-see TV lineup.
Yeah.
And then I think it tailed off at the end, but it was like a top 20, top 30 show.
Okay.
For a while there. But the first year, it was something like 87 out of 93 for the year, and it was just terrible ratings. Like nobody was watching it.
Right. But then it got a zillion Emmy nominations and critical acclaim, and Fred Silverman, I think, liked it.
And that turned out to be a good decision to stick with it. I mean, maybe part of it was being shamed away from canceling it by the Emmy nominations and wins. I mean, it did very well right at that that Emmy ceremony after the first year. But yeah, it wound up being one of the more memorable shows of its era, even if it wasn't a huge blockbuster smash. Like you said, like we were aware of it. I mean, I was definitely aware of it.
Right.
And it was a popular show. It did go into reruns. I was kind of looking around and saw some old ads, and I remembered, this station that I got showed it pretty early in reruns, like 5 days a week.
See, I think maybe it was on somewhere, and I watched some that way. Because when I started watching these, it all just felt very familiar. Most of the characters I already had a sense of, maybe not all of them. And a few of those characters, like Bruce Weitz's Belker, I feel like he made it into the pop culture a little bit. Like, was this a breakout sort of guy? Because he growled and bit people.
Yeah.
But then it's like more complicated than that too.
Right.
And I remembered other just little things like Barbara Boston, this Furlow's ex-wife, being a little bit much to deal with.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that character at all.
After watching a bunch of episodes, I've grown to appreciate that she's mostly being played for laughs, and that it can be kind of funny.
Yeah. And
he's a good straight man for her.
Right.
But she is exhausting. There are a few characters on here that I find a little exhausting. But
yeah.
And I remember as a kid, like, at least knowing that Michael Conrad, not knowing his name, but recognizing him from The Incredible Hulk of all things.
Well, I do remember, like, one thing, and I didn't really remember this until kind of, doing research for the show and kind of revisiting it. But even though I didn't really watch the show a lot growing up, I did think it was odd that it was on in reruns, like, every day. I just thought, because it seemed like the classic late night show and just more of a grown up show. So to me, it seemed weird that, okay, we're going to put this on at like 5 p.m. or 6 p.m.
Yeah.
Every day, when you're getting ready for dinner or something. It just didn't seem like the kind of show to watch that time of day.
Right.
In reruns like that. But it did. It aired like that many places. So yeah. I don't know why I particularly cared about that.
Right.
Probably because I didn't really want to be watching it at the time. I wanted to be watching something like 8 is Enough at 5 p.m.
Right.
Or 6 p.m. or whatever.
Yeah, I might have been wanting to watch it and feeling like I wasn't supposed to be watching it.
Yeah. I think the serialized nature of the show, too, kind of makes that a little bit different option than, like an escapist sitcom like Three's Company or What's Happening that I remember being on so much during the week. So
it's very serialized, and yet they do wrap up things pretty quickly. But the episode we're going to get into is tying up some things from previous episodes, but it's also establishing like the last 3 episodes of the season.
Yeah, I was thinking about that because I wound up watching the other 2 episodes.
Yeah.
And I was thinking it really could have been called a 3-part episode.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what happened before it. I didn't see those, but like after going through them, it's like, okay, this took you to the end of the season. They didn't call it a 3-part episode, but really it played like it very well could have been because there were many threads that were followed up in the other 2 episodes.
Yeah. Yeah, there were a few things that got set up. I mean, so Dennis Franz is in this episode that we'll talk about, playing the Sal Benedetto character. And, of course, a few years later, he came back as Norman Bunce. Totally different character, somewhat similar. And he had shown up in a couple other episodes, and we'll get a little bit of that gets followed up on in this. And the stuff going on with coffee is from a few episodes before. But then a lot of it is pretty much just these. And even the title character, so this episode we're going to talk about is called Spotlight on Rico. And Rico is a junkie. And he appears almost like a background character the whole season. Just random places, these little things. And I wonder if that's a situation they had in mind, or they saw what the actor was doing and said, let's do more with this guy. But then a lot of the other stuff is just in these episodes.
Right.
But in general, it's a mostly in the station kind of show with some personal stuff, but mostly it seems most of that is around Furillo. And the Dana J. Fronte is Captain Furillo, and his girlfriend, Joyce Davenport, who's a public defender. And you get a little bit about other people. Belker gets a lot of stuff this season. His dad dies, and he starts a relationship with another cop. But a lot of it happens in the precinct or on the streets of this unnamed city somewhere in America.
Yeah.
Definitely seems like a big city, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because from what I read, people assume that it's Chicago, and I guess there's clues to indicate that maybe it's more or less Chicago.
I think they filmed some there, and like the cars look like Chicago cars, but I think they went out of their way not to name the city.
You know what I thought it was? Growing up, I think I first assumed that it was New York, and then for some reason I thought it was Boston before I knew anything about Boston at all.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I thought that, but
interesting. It
just seemed like I assumed that Hill Street was like a real place, and Hill Street just sounded like kind of a northeast kind of thing to me more than a Midwest thing.
Okay.
But apparently, I guess Bochco was looking at like sort of Rust Belt cities and
I think so.
like Pittsburgh and Cleveland and
Yeah.
kind of like Chicago even.
It's definitely somewhere with weather and a diverse population. And Hill Street, this Hill Street district seems to be like the tough district in town.
There's a big ethnic mix.
Yeah.
Right.
There's like African Americans and Peruvians and other Latinos and Irish gangs, and there's this ongoing thing with gangs. They show up in the pilot, right? These gangs, and it's on the one hand interesting because Furillo finds ways to deal with them and kind of manage them a little bit. On the other hand, they're wearing outlandish costumes. It seems like as much as a kind of creatively progressive show as this was, like that seems like a throwback to all those 70s cop shows that Bochco would have worked on.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the Irish guys wear bowler hats and green vests.
Like it's like a big gimmick. Like like they feel that they have to really play up the Irishness.
Yeah, and every gang has like an outfit.
Yeah.
That's kind of amusing. And like David Caruso is the leader of the Irish gang.
Yeah, it's like the Warriors or something like that inspired them, even though, you know, the thing that I read was like Fort Apache, the Bronx was like a big influence. Which is a little bit more realistic than the Warriors.
Right.
But yeah, no, that's a good point. And I guess that's also speaks to what was big on people's concerns, like in the 80s, as far as crime goes. I mean, you think about like urban gangs and subway crime, things like that, and that seems to be what's kind of reflected in Hill Street Blues a lot, as far as like the big threats, like threats to public safety. Yeah. Like I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen very much of the show, like I'm saying, but like from what I've seen, like the gang element and just general like gang violence and tension and inner gang warfare seems like more of a bigger thing than say like drugs or something like that. Which like nowadays, like drugs in itself would be seen as like a big problem that maybe they're trying to clean up these other issues, but that seems like a side deal going on to like this big gang structure going on.
Yeah, I think it's all part of it. Drugs are definitely around, and plus you have this. I can't think of other police shows that actually have like the full focus on not just one area of a department or a precinct.
Right.
You know, NYPD Blue is just detectives.
Right.
Homicide is obviously just homicide detectives. Their Chips was Highway Patrol. you know, and there have been shows about beat cops, but mostly it's usually detectives.
Yeah.
And here you get the beat cops, you get the detectives, you get the different management type people.
Right.
And you also get them interacting with other precincts and the chief and the DA and like the whole structure basically.
That's an excellent point.
And I don't quite know the people in khakis or some sort of civil servants who do a different kind. They don't do police work exactly, but they do like the office management type stuff.
Right.
So other than that, I don't know if they get into the prison or the jail system, but other than that, you're kind of getting all of it.
Right, including like the politics of administration and things like that, which is interesting. That's a good point. Yeah, there's a lot of shows that cover aspects of that, but if they delve into one other aspect of it, it'll be just for one episode only, and it's still through the eyes of like the detectives or maybe like a beat cop or something. But yeah, this combines all those areas, which is interesting.
Yeah, and sometimes people aren't interacting at all, and sometimes they're, you know, a couple of the beat cops will be assigned to help to back up Belker on one of his undercover things, or, you know, one of the other detectives will be, or the beat cops will go, like in this one, they go to a crime scene, and then a detective comes to follow it up.
Right. In
the precinct, you just see people going in and out, and all the famous roll call scenes at the beginning of most episodes, they're all there. Yeah. And they're kind of all interacting and riffing and all of that. So I like that about it.
Yeah, it creates a real sense of setting, too. Like, even if, as you kind of say, like, even if it's mostly interiors, that precinct in this station looks real. There's so many aspects of it. And the fact that you see it's always crowded.
Yes.
There's always the hustle and bustle is very vivid in it. And it just looks realistic.
Yeah. And that can get distracting sometimes, I think, but it's engaging, and it makes it feel alive, and it's dirty, and they don't just use typewriters; they're using like manual typewriters, old, heavy manual typewriters. And they have to deal with sometime in this season. They have to deal with the furnace putting out too much heat because it's a really old furnace,
right.
And they're looking around town for someone old enough to know how to work with this furnace,
right.
And then other episodes, like I liked that the weather is a thing. Like the beginning of this season, there's like a heat wave, so everybody's sweaty and they're under their pits and their shirts and everything. Right. It's like 100 degrees. And this episode, they're dealing with not getting paid because of city council disputes. And I hate to use the word gritty, but
yeah,
it is, or it's real, I guess, or realish.
Yeah.
But that all makes it watchable, I think. So this episode, as I said, is called Spotlight on Rico, and it's the 20th episode of season 3.
Correct.
Really, it's not a spotlight on Rico. Rico's a part of it, but
yeah.
And Spotlight on Rico is a name or a line that he said in a couple episodes earlier, where these Catholic schoolgirls who have some criminology class are there, but he's in the thing, and he reacts to them as if he's on American Bandstand. And then, it's a spotlight on Rico.
I think in the previously on they show that, but there's no other context than that. So you just see him saying that basically.
Yeah, so he's this junkie. We find out in the episode hasn't been clean since 1977, I think, and it's 1983.
Yeah.
One of these khaki guys, Leo, who, from what I can tell, was on the show the entire time. Season 6 or 7 actually finally becomes a regular cast member, but he's taken it upon himself to try to clean up this guy, and they put him in a cell, and he's taking care of him while he goes through withdrawal. Mm-hmm. So that's a thread in this episode and it carries on to the next couple episodes, but certainly not the main story. The main story is probably the Sal Benedetto thing. So that's the Dennis Franz character, and he's a detective from another division, Midtown, and earlier in the season there was Robert Davi had a memorable one episode role as a undercover cop who was dirty.
Okay.
And ended up murdered. And he had a beef with this J.D. LaRue character. And there was a brief thing where people thought maybe he did it. But it turns out, anyway, he was super dirty, and his boss, Fuchs, who shows up briefly in this episode, is already under scrutiny because of that.
Okay.
And Benedetto, we had seen a couple times. There were a few episodes where Rico the Charles Hay character got busted down to a traffic cop because he got arrested by the sheriff for mooning someone. And he and Benedetto got into it, and then they were at a bar. They were going to have a fight at a bar, and Benedetto hit him with a sap and then beat him up.
That's great that he had a sap.
Yeah.
And used it, by the way.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of that.
And then the next episode, Michael Warren's character, Bobby Hill, who's Rico's partner, he beat up Benedetto. So when Benedetto shows up for this thing he's going to do, he kind of tries to make peace with them. Although based on what happens in the other 2 episodes, I feel like that's just part of a bigger con. He's trying to ingratiate himself because he's actually a pretty dirty cop himself. But he comes with this scheme. There's this thing, and it didn't come up in any episodes before, but part of it is that body parts of some guy keep showing up around town. They think this loan shark, Roland Simone, had something to do with it. Benedetto thinks Simone's involved in more than just being a loan shark. And he's from the Midtown division. They had confiscated a bunch of drugs, soda, as they call it. And they want to try to get him to try to get it back. So in order to do this, they have to get a different loan shark to sell his paper to Simone. And they want him to make up some paper for a cop, and for some reason it's got to be a black cop, and then they'll use that to try to lure him in. And so he gets Washington, who's one of the detectives involved in this. He wanted Hill, but Furlow's like, well, Hill's doesn't do that kind of work. So they get Washington involved in that. So that's a big part of this episode, and just having him interacting with people and being very Dennis Franzy about it.
Yeah, it's a big part of the episode, and it's easy to say this with hindsight, but he's very charismatic, and it didn't surprise me at all that he went on to other things. And I just know, just from watching this episode and not trying to make retroactive claims or anything, like when he's on the screen, like I want to watch him and want to see more of him. He's just interesting, like the way he does things, and even like his facial expressions and stuff. He's a big standout.
Yeah.
Not surprisingly.
Right. And of course he's also doing the character is doing
true,
unpleasant but interesting things, like grabbing somebody's nose with pliers.
Yeah.
And the Bunce character has some similar behaviors, I think. Like I watched an early episode with him where he and Goldblum go to search an apartment, and he's just like tearing things apart, ripping pillows, and Goldblum, who's this very kind of by the book, but like bleeding heart kind of cop, is. It's like, oh, just search the place.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right, though. I mean, I have to imagine at the time he was watchable, too. It's not just...
Yeah. I mean, I can't say that for sure, but, well, maybe we can, because his character, he comes back as another character.
And then gets
a spin-off and has gone on to other things, so I think that pretty much proves, what we're saying.
Yeah, I think so. And the other big story in this one, and then I guess we can fill in more of the details, but involves another memorable character actor who went on to bigger things, Jonathan Banks, Mike from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, who of course was on tons of stuff in the 80s.
Yeah.
But he plays a homeless guy who they bring in as a witness to a murder at a homeless shelter, and it turns out he has multiple personalities.
Yes.
And is also the murderer.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
more importantly, the multiple personalities, cause, so you get to see Jonathan Banks do a lot of different kind of stuff.
Yeah, a lot of stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
If you've only seen him on as that one character, Mike, you get to see him do a lot of different things here.
Yeah, the personalities that we see include an 82-year-old teacher, a guy named Pete who's blind, and I like he becomes Pete, and he's like, "My name is Pete, I'm blind."
Yeah.
And he talks for 2 or 3 minutes, and then he's, "My name is Pete, I'm blind."
Yeah.
Like a I don't know a school play or something.
Yeah.
TJ, who's the killer, who rages and breaks windows,
Yeah,
all sorts of stuff, and a couple other people. We don't get to see him as a black prostitute named Angel.
No, we don't.
Or a computer programmer.
Maybe for the best.
Yeah.
Now, I'm a big fan, as you know, of Jonathan Banks on Breaking Bad, but watching this episode, I cannot say the same as I did for Dennis Franz. Like, there's the showiness, and it's an interesting character with this multiple personalities gimmick. But to me, it seemed more like a gimmick. I wasn't totally blown away by it.
Okay.
Like, I don't see, like, oh man. And part of it's because he's playing such a different character. But I wouldn't. Yeah. I would never have guessed this guy would go on to with his terse manner and everything, wind up crafting this memorable character. I would never have seen that.
Yeah.
But like you said, he was in tons of stuff, and I didn't take much note of him then. Just he was just like a working actor that did good work and everything. But retroactively speaking, I don't know if he stands out as much as you would think, given he's playing this big role with multiple personalities.
Yeah, I could see that. I do think, like, the scene where he rages, I think it's not just him, but it's the way it's filmed and everything. But there's an intensity to that that's pretty powerful. Yeah. I guess anytime somebody's smashing windows with a billy club, it gets your attention.
Yeah, I would think so. More than the guy, figuring out, the police car maintenance budget in the background with a pencil and erasing something on a legal yellow pad. Right. Look at that guy. He's fascinating. Yeah. What's he doing with that pencil? Yeah. But yeah, no, you're right. I mean, it's. I don't mean to downgrade him, but it just didn't stand out to me as much as like seeing Dennis Franz is like, whoa, And I didn't really watch NYPD Blue either. Right. So a lot of that is pretty new to me. I just knew of Dennis Franz without really appreciating his work.
Yeah, he's really good at doing what he does in this episode, and Sipowicz has shades of that, but of course is more complicated than either of these characters, I think. But he's something. So some of the other things going on there, they're not, I think we mentioned maybe, but there's this city council thing going on and they're not getting paid. And it seems like money's always an issue with these guys anyway. Not surprising. And there's some sort of British guy is there with a robot, a police robot. Yeah. And then there's some various little personal things going on. Hill's car got confiscated or got towed. Oh, yeah. He's trying to get that. And that's one of the ways Benedetto ingratiates himself. He calls up the guy and just...
basically calls in a favor.
Yeah, calls in a favor.
Because the guy at the tow lot is very by the book. And even when he realized that it's a police officer talking to him and kind of getting agitated with him, he's still like very cynical and just kind of like, nothing I can do about it. Just pay us, and he won't take checks. Yeah, he won't take checks, and Hill doesn't have a cash with him. And because they're not getting paid. Yeah. I mean, that was one like interesting like detail, because this that's a thread that goes on. The whole thing with them not getting paid. I'm not sure if they say it in this episode, but they make it clear, or they make it seem like it's like one of the local politicians or the council members sort of grandstanding. And
Yeah.
this is being held up because they're making speeches and things like
Right.
that. Sort of indicating that it's really like the working man is the victim of, these bloviators talking. But just the fact that the little detail, like, okay, this grocery store is accepting, it has credit, you're getting like promissory notes and all this kind of stuff. I mean,
some kind of vouchers that they can use. And
yeah.
earlier in the season, there's a city councilman who they have a bunch of issues with, who's they keep pulling over for drunk driving. And I thought, and he's jockeying along with the police chief, who's certainly a kind of a blowhard. They're both thinking about running for mayor, and Furlow uses some of this to get what he needs. But and I thought, I had already seen these episodes. I'm like, he must be the guy causing the problem. But it turns out he hits a woman drunk driving, and he's gone.
Yeah.
So
there's just some other deal.
Some other jerk. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it does, politics do come up a lot.
Yeah.
Like office politics, but city politics too.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because just some of the things that you've mentioned, just by explaining them, it's clear why this was different than a lot of the other cop shows that went before it. Just referencing things that happened in other episodes, threads that went through, that were built, things that were built early in the season that are paying off now, things that were developed, characters coming back. I mean, something like Kojak, you wouldn't have that. You might have a two-parter where something would directly, but you didn't have things running through the whole season and things build up like this.
Right. I'm sure Kojak all the time went against sort of some higher up telling him not to do something.
Yeah.
But I'm also sure he never suffered any consequences for that.
That's another good point. Yeah, that is the big difference. Is you didn't have people getting busted down,
right?
To losing rank or and things actually happening because of that.
Yeah, or like in this season, there's a thing where the mayor and the chief decide, a classic thing that still goes on, and the kind of thing that The Wire covered in depth. But we're going to clean up this one block.
Yeah.
Right. We're going to show a force. We're going to clean up this one block, and it gives a hunter something to do. And it's wasting manpower when there's all this other stuff going on, and two, it's just pushing crime in other areas. And Furlow shuts it down, and then the chief comes and basically he's like, "We're going to keep doing this until I say stop, day after day." And just like, ugh. And then it gets solved because someone gets a judge to order an injunction. Because you're busting all these people, and it's overflowing the courts, and it's just a mess.
Right.
But the chief is such a politician that's all he cares about.
I think that's like a big difference is like on a lot of cop shows, like of the era and before it, you would always have the threat, like, I'll bust you down to lieutenant or I'll have your badge. Whereas on Hill Street Blues, if you're watching this, week to week, you might actually think that could actually really happen.
Yeah.
Because characters would get hurt and things would happen like that. So, yeah, it might actually happen on a show like Hill Street Blues.
Yeah, and there's a lot of corruption. It never seems to be the main characters, but like Furillo is a force against corruption, and it seems to be a repeated thing coming up. And not just this season, but other ones I was watching, and he's on some task force and all of this kind of stuff.
I kind of started watching it from the beginning, just like a handful of episodes, and even then, there's kind of like storylines with cops being accused of being on the take or actually being on the take.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a pervasive thing, a pervasive element in the show.
And, even like the Hill Street cops kind of misbehaving. Like there's some bachelor parties where things happen, gambling and things. And like Furillo seems very much, he just doesn't want that to happen at all. Whereas some of the other people, like Michael Conrad's character, Sergeant Esterhaus, is more, you see in these roll calls, he kind of suggests not to behave that way.
Yeah.
But there's a little bit of humor to it. Like, I know this is what.
And like a little boys will be boys.
Yeah.
Can I talk about the roll call, because that is my absolute favorite part of the show.
I
mean, it's brilliant, and it may be one of the most famous things about the series to people that haven't really seen it. But Michael Conrad getting up there and doing this, I guess most episodes started like that, correct?
I think so. Yeah.
Beginning.
Yeah.
Just doing this roll call and just like his character Esterhaus, like this is a situation he's giving them bad news.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love the way he's delivering the bad news that they're not getting paid, which is a big deal.
Yeah.
And he knows they're going to be upset about it. But he kind of does it like in an earthy but lyrical way, and he's talking about everything, and he's sort of extolling the virtues of looking at things positively. And he's saying he makes a reference to, like, in the good news, it's springtime, and he makes a reference to sap being in the trees.
Right, rising in people.
Yeah. Yes, and with a smile on his face, and he's like moving his hands and he's gesticulating, but he's doing it like very naturally. There's no indication that he's putting on an act for them. It's like he's playing it up for them, but he's doing it out of a genuine. He's being a leader, basically.
Yeah.
He's trying to give them this bad news in a way that will brace them and kind of make them feel a little bit better about it. And just from a practical standpoint, getting them out there, so they'll go do their jobs and not, be complaining about this all day.
Yeah, and is a character who he likes words. So he's, like you said, he's down to earth and kind of gritty, but he's using language in this wonderful way. And
right.
And they're basically monologues that he's doing, and yeah, they're amazing. Like, I remember reading about the show maybe before we did it and stuff, and his name always coming up, and of course he died, in his 50s, but pretty quickly he had cancer, and he, looking back on his career, he seems to have been like in everything, going back to the early days of TV, or maybe not live TV, but had a long career as a working actor. Mm-hmm. And he won 2 Emmys for this role, and I didn't know until I really got into these how good he was at that.
Yeah.
And I think it's the first episode of this season, is when you're looking around for an episode to watch, it's the only episode that seems to come up, and it's the first episode of TV that David Milch ever wrote. And so his roll call at the beginning of that, I was just like, oh, that's classic David Milch because of the language, and he's going on about how they should try to use alternate words instead of profanity, and it just seemed very David Milch and everything. But he wasn't around in the earlier seasons. This seems like a character built for him to write.
Right.
So I'm just assuming he wrote all of them. But he probably didn't.
Yeah.
And his name isn't on every script in the season, although they seem to have a small staff who wrote together a lot of the episodes. But yeah, there's something to behold. And even if he's, like in this episode, I don't think he does anything else.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, maybe he was already sick or something, but I think it's just they have so many people. Because there are other episodes where he has his own little stories.
And I've seen him interacting with not just like the rank and file, but also like working with Frank.
Yeah.
I mean, he's the kind of guy that seems like everybody gets along with. It seems like he's the kind of guy that you could see people being loyal to him and everything. And the other thing I like too is that he's effective, like to us, the viewer, when he's giving those speeches. But like in some of these these roll call speeches, it's also realistic in the sense that like it's not like they're tuning him out, but you see all the police men and women talking, and I mean they're doing other things.
Yeah.
I mean they're not just sitting there like googly eyed like I am watching this scene like this is such great. It's like they're talking, they're making like comments and jokes, and they're doing other stuff, and it just again kind of adding to that realism of the show. That even though you have this almost poetic language here, you have the cops are still acting like real cops at a job.
Yeah, there's something like just very loose and rowdy almost about this.
Right.
The way they're reacting, and it seems filmed in a slightly looser way too, like not quite a verite way, but they will just cut to people like kind of reacting to things, and it seems much maybe their reactions are a little improvised or something. Yeah, it's great. And then he, of course, Michael Conrad died, and they replaced him with someone who's different, but still effective in those kind of scenes too.
I think you touched on something there that we should also talk about is like the style of filmmaking, kind of drawing on different techniques, the camera work and some like documentary style filmmaking. But because it wasn't just like content wise, but it was also visually, right, that this show was influential and kind of groundbreaking.
Yeah.
I mean, even like the beginning in that theme song, it kind of adds, and you talked about this area having weather.
Yeah.
And like the grittiness of it, and I think that was borne out a lot by the camera work within the shows too. You'd have like handheld camera work and sort of like maybe a little bit more sense of being disoriented than you were. You had like a combination of all these people being in a scene at the same time, but also like kind of the camera work being a little jarring and kind of keeping you off balance a little bit.
Yeah, it's not as handheld as NYPD Blue or Homicide, but there's still something like that.
Yeah, and I think actually, and that's something like that for me. I'm watching when I'm watching this show, I'm really thinking, I really needed to watch this back in the day, because now it doesn't seem as like groundbreaking. I mean, I could easily see somebody that's seen all those shows that you just mentioned and thinking, well, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
And part of me is, I'm not thinking what's the big deal, but part of me, I don't quite get the import of how new it was at the time, because I've seen so many things that have imitated it since then.
Yeah.
But at the time, that visual style was not being done on, every other cop show at the time.
No.
Or any show period, really.
Yeah.
Just the fact that the sprawling cast and these storylines. But yeah, I think visually there was sort of like an element to it as well. Yeah. And even I think like this is another thing. Like maybe another reason I didn't watch it as a kid is that sort of like dark. It seemed like it had like a murkier palette, visually, and even in the promos that would come across and when it would just come on. And I think for me, I associate it with being a 10 o'clock show, and kind of retroactively now I associate that time slot with ER, Thursday at 10 o'clock, which was an incredibly exhilarating but also depressing show.
Yeah.
So to me, it's like, okay, this is the kind of gloomier, dark show. The theme song is vaguely depressing.
Yeah.
You've got rain and cars driving around this, and so that's why to me it's kind of a surprise going back and seeing how much humor is in the show,
right?
And how much of a part that played in it, because I associated Hill Street Blues as just being like a relentlessly, maybe not relentlessly, but an overall downbeat show.
Yeah.
Whereas the actual series doesn't seem like that to me.
It's very funny in a lot of different sort of styles of comedy. Like some of it is grounded, like the roll call kind of stuff, and then you have like this Howard Hunter character, James Seeking, who's the SWAT commander. But I assume this is a joke. Their SWAT team is the emergency action team. EAT.
But it's like the equivalent of like a SWAT unit.
And most episodes has nothing to do. I mean, as a cop, because there just aren't instances where they need that. So he's this, he's a Vietnam vet. He's a stereotypical sort of Reagan Republican, military obsessed, kind of racist, also just full of himself, a blowhard. And he's a little hard to take sometimes, but a lot of stuff he does is funny, or funny is at his expense, and everyone, most of the people, react to him as he's just an oddball.
Yeah, like, oh, he's harmless.
But I think he's good at his job. When he has to do his job, he's good at it, although, of course, he wants to go in guns blazing.
Right. Like if you have like a pickpocket running around and you think you know where he is, he'd want to like napalm like a city block to flush him out or something like that.
Right.
Like totally over the top.
Yeah.
He wants to treat everything as if it's a SWAT situation.
Yeah, he's in a long line of that kind of character, like the Sterling Hayden character in Dr. Strangelove, but he's not Frank Burns. No, because he can do his job.
Right. Yeah.
But he is in the mode and some of his beliefs and things of a Frank Burns. Yeah, and he
does look like the other characters are kind of indulging him more than respecting him necessarily. But I don't like that character from what I've seen. He seems to me too much of a cartoon, and I find myself not liking his scenes. Although in this story, he has some scenes he's a little bit more laid back. I guess we didn't mention, but he had like a storyline.
Yeah.
That was kind of.
So over the season, early in the season he had gone in the hospital for like a biopsy, and of course he was reacting to that as if he was on his deathbed. He had this nurse, Linda Wolfowitz, played by, I forget the actress's name right now, but played Carol on a lot of Magnum PI episodes. And they have this romance. And you don't see a lot of it, but you see a little bit. And she's very, like, kind of aggressive about it and likes his oddity and seems to fit in with it. But then, one, she's Jewish, so already for him, that's weird. And then in this one, she breaks up with him because he's so into his own thing and he's just about himself.
Right. Well, that's interesting, the context you just gave me, because in fact, it seems like he's talking about advancing the relationship.
Yeah.
And so he's totally blindsided by this because he's thinking about making the relationship more serious. And then she kind of just like, no, in fact, let's just break up.
I think he had already proposed to her once, but I might be confusing it because Esther Haas also proposed to this woman he had all sorts of sexual adventures with. And she rejected him, but then they went on to do more stuff. And his character, by the way, in the show died in the throes of passion with her.
I do remember that being like a thing, like when that happened. I remember that making news.
Yeah. Hunter is sort of crushed by this, and there's this robot, which is mostly used for comedy. We see the cops playing around with it, and they dump coffee on somebody, and it has a camera, and Betty Thomas's character is watching, we find out, but he's in the locker room reading the manual.
Yeah.
And relates to the robot and its inability to relate to people.
Yeah.
And it's sort of sad. And then at the end, he goes to a massage parlor, and this Vietnamese masseuse, they connect over the Vietnam, and he gets very poetic and real, and she cries, and then he says something like, "I want to go back to that country and kill every one of those commies for you."
Yeah.
So he's still him, but he's a little more
Right.
human than normal.
Well, I definitely felt sympathy for him in this episode. You mentioned the robot and kind of the antics that they're doing with the robot reminds me that I think in the second or third episode of this arc, or one of the episodes after it, they show like there's a handful of the guys take the robot and drive it, pilot it into the woman's restroom.
Yes.
You know, and it looks like a scene out of Porky's.
Yeah.
It totally, like, every now and then, that's one thing I don't really like in the show. I'm not really liking the humor. It seems to me like a lot of times it belongs in a different kind of show. And, you know, part of it is, you know, it was just my sensibilities and maybe just seeing other kind of shows that I think would maybe do that a little bit better. But that kind of stands out to me. And that scene there, not just from a sense of, like, oh, that's very politically incorrect, obviously, now, but just the sense to me, like, it just seems goofy. It seems like a nod more to Porky's than to being realistic.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you could argue that, okay, yeah, if the cops had access to this robot, they would want to do this, but, I mean, it strains credibility a little bit to have them actually doing that in the station, I think.
And then later, she turns it on that.
Right.
The Lucy Bates, Betty Thomas takes it into the men's room, and then it turns out that's a plot point because a bomb goes off.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually an important point that the show acknowledges. By doing that, I think the show acknowledges, like, yeah, this is just they're treating it more as like frat house behavior and stuff. But they're giving her the chance to turn the tide on them. But it's more like it's not condoning it or condemning it. Really, it's just saying, well, this is the kind of stuff that's going on here.
Yeah, I think they do. Yeah, tend to do that. Just present it and let you pass judgment if you want. But I mean, there's weird stuff like in a few episodes before this, like LaRue has a flirtation with one of the Catholic schoolgirls, played by Ali Sheedy. Wow. I mean, and she's flirting. She's a participant in it, but it's still. And Washington's like just keeps. He says something like 3 words: statutory rape, and things, and nothing ends up happening. But it's still and right in the pilot, Esterhazy who's in his 50s is dating a high school girl.
Yeah.
That's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem even okay for 1981.
Yeah. It's a little weird, some of it.
Yeah. But they also talk, they have, so Belker gets in a relationship with this other, like a rookie, but she wants, I mean, she goes to Betty Thomas's character for advice on, like, well, what's going to happen, and are you and your partner together because people think they are, which they're not. And that's more like a grounded scene about, well, this is how people are going to perceive this, and it's tough enough for us already. But if you want it, you just got to know what you're dealing with going in. Well,
let's make no mistake about this too. Like, a lot of our listeners, I think, grew up watching these shows when we did, but maybe not everybody. Like the Betty Thomas's character, it was not at all standard to have females on the police force, especially like in a large environment like that. Even they would still stand out, and it was still seen as kind of a novelty, and probably in a lot of places. So as far as like men and women interacting as equals in a police department, that was not at all something you took for granted.
Right.
Like, I mean, even today, I'm sure it's an issue, but it was far different back in the early 80s.
As we know from Charlie's Angels, you can go to the academy, but you're not going to get a job you want.
That is true. That is true.
And I think maybe she wasn't a street cop when the show started. I don't know for sure. I read an interview because her partner, played by Ed Marinaro, originally came on as a guest star, and then he says in this interview that they realized they could use him as a way to get her on the street. And so it might be she wanted to be on the street and couldn't be yet or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, she's an interesting character too.
Yeah.
And brings some of that humor because she comes from an improv background.
Yeah.
Which I don't think maybe I knew that, but was at Second City the same time like Bill Murray and John Belushi were there. Started a Second City in Pasadena, and so it makes sense she went on to direct comedy. Yeah.
Other than Michael Conrad's character, who are some of your favorite characters in the series?
I mean, Frillo's great. Travanti's just really good in that. Like being patient, but he has a temper too when he needs to.
Yeah.
I like Bruce White's. I think I remember, my feeling was that going in was maybe everything was overblown about him, but that character's so complicated. And like one of the running things with him is him getting phone calls from his mother, who you never see. Okay. But they're these one-sided phone calls, and he's usually filling out paperwork with someone he's just arrested while and his mom's got some little problem.
And he's playing like dutiful son on the phone to her while he's...
Right, and he eats weird food. Just kind of a unique character, I think. I like Goldblum, like Joe Spano, for some reason. I just like his presence. I don't like Cayetana much, who's the other lieutenant. There's something about him that... I think he's a lot of times used comedically, but like the character is he's ambitious, and in some of the episodes before this, he's all upset because even though he's already a lieutenant, Goldblum got promoted to lieutenant, and he sees this as an eventual roadblock for him becoming captain, which is what he wants. There's also one where he comes in with a toupee that at first gets played for laughs, and then is a little sympathetic. I mean,
this is Ray,
right?
Yes,
okay. Yeah,
and he's like Colombian, or he's got some
yes,
kind of
he's
Latin
Colombian.
American,
yeah. There's a good episode actually, where he gets presented the Hispanic Officer of the Year award, and it's this big banquet, and he gets upset because all the food is Mexican. The only other Hispanics there are the waiters.
Right.
And he gets up and makes his drunken speech, and he's definitely sympathetic there. He's like, and that Hunter introduces him by talking about what a great Puerto Rican he is, and
yeah,
I'm Colombian.
Right.
There's just something sometimes that rubs me the wrong
That's
way.
a character that I forgot all about.
Yeah, me too. And he's pretty much just in the office.
Okay.
I don't quite know. I mean, he does stuff. He kind of runs the office a little bit. Okay. And I always liked Rico and Hill.
Oh, you like Michael Warren, of course.
Yeah, and Charles Haid. I think they're good together. And just about all of them I like for some reason, except for and Hunter can get on my nerves, and the Faye. It can get on my nerves too, and like LaRue, I still haven't seen any episodes where he's really in bad shape, but apparently that character is kind of a wreck and an alcoholic and gambling addict and all sorts of things.
Wow.
He definitely seems like not totally focused on the job. He spent some episodes in this season trying to promote a comedian, Vic Hitler Jr.
Wow.
who turns out to also be narcoleptic.
Oh my gosh.
Like they book his big break,
What's going on there?
And he's like old school, just one-liner comedian, and he finally gets other guys to like pitch in money to help promote him, and they get him in this club, and he's doing his act, and he's killing, and then he just falls asleep.
Wow.
And then he'll wake up and just immediately start doing his act again.
Right. Well, that arc that opens the series, I think this is where, the LaRue character is the one that's implicated by Dan Hidea's, is like a guest star, and is implicated like accused of being a dirty cop.
Yeah.
But the way they present it is there's reason they make it like there's reason to suspect, and he's tempted. So it kind of makes him a relatively interesting character. Like even from the beginning, it looks like they're setting him up like, oh, there's going to be tensions with this guy. Like he might be trouble. Although Ferrello figures out what's going on and stands by him. Yeah.
Like I remember in the pilot, him coming off as kind of suave. He's hitting on Davenport and
right, trying to look like they were trying to set him up like as a ladies' man.
Yeah.
And then some of the other ones, I didn't get that impression at all. But like maybe they abandoned that or something. I don't know.
And I guess that actor had a lot of the same issues. And Travanti was public about being a recovering alcoholic, and of course Furlow is. Davenport, Veronica Hamill, she's good. It's just a good cast. Yeah,
that's an interesting part of the show. I guess that's one of the big reveals of the first episode, right? Is that they have a relationship together, even though they're at times confronting each other professionally. But it seems like that's one thing the show does a good job of, is having their relationship and having it be a conflict, but not overwhelming everything else that's going on. Yeah. And sort of realistic in this, because, well, at this point, at some point they go public. Yeah. Pretty early, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And the episode or 2 episodes before this, they got married.
Okay, so they're actually married.
And I think that's the scene with Faye, right?
Yeah, because his ex-wife is upset. Like, how is their child going to address
who's Joyce?
Right. Yeah.
Frank Jr. can't call her mommy.
Yeah.
she listed things she could and said Wonder Woman was one of them. I was like, Veronica Ham will probably audition for that part.
Yeah, you know what? That's a good.
In our list of other Wonder
point.
Woman, along with Connie Salica and Aaron Gray, Veronica Hamill's got to be in there too.
Yeah, she's almost underrated a little bit because she's primarily associated with this one role, and then she kind of went into like TV movies. It seems like after that, she might have other series that I forget, but I mean, she was on the show the whole run, right?
Yeah,
one of the more beautiful actresses of the '80s.
Yeah, for sure,
and very very good at this role.
Yeah,
especially because and that's another thing is I kind of like her scenes with Furlow because they really come off as equals to me in the sense that they're sparring back and forth and they have their disagreements, but I never get the impression that like I said, I haven't seen a lot, but I'm getting the impression that they're going at it toe to toe with respect for each other.
Yeah, and
it's not on traditional gender roles or even anything else. It's just like two people that, in a realistic way, they want to make this work, but they have these kind of issues, but they're not always at each other's throats in an angry way, but they have these conflicts. And I just like their interactions. I think those two play that very well.
Yeah, and they were passionate, and that's one of the, I guess, hallmarks of the show is them being a little racy with some of that. And, at least for the time. I think in that same interview, so there's this website, hillstreetblues.net, that has a lot of information, and they had a transcript of this Playboy interview from, I guess, during the production of season 4, and they talked to most of the actors and Bochco, and somewhere in there, I think Travanti says that if you're an alcoholic in a relationship and you get sober, that you're going to change, and if your partner doesn't change with you, then it's probably not going to work, and it seems like that, in the terms of his ex-wife, that's the case. She didn't evolve with him. And that Davenport is the kind of person he wants to be with.
That makes a lot of sense when you put it like that, yeah.
Of course, she's also... Faye clearly, I'm sure, suffered a lot because of his alcoholism, but...
Right.
She is a piece of work, too.
She is, and I'm coming at it, too, from watching some of these early episodes where you just see everything through her. You don't even see her necessarily in some of these scenes, and she's just coming across like a piece of work and a problem to be dealt with. Yeah. And you don't really get her point of view. Right. And
her classic scenes are she just barges into the station with some issue going on. Yeah. And early in this season, I think he yelled at Hayes, but you can't keep doing this. You got to get on with your life. Right. And she's starting to, which makes her more sympathetic that she's trying to get it together. So, and she got involved with this traffic court judge and is pregnant. I don't know what happens with that beyond this season, but she did get pregnant, and the judge doesn't want anything to do with it. And, but she's opposed to abortion, and and has thought, oh, maybe it'll work out I'll get back with Frank somehow. Yeah, and of course it doesn't.
It's interesting, a show that Barney Miller. Early on, they played up the more domestic aspects with Barney and his wife and everything, and. And parts of this are well, this is some of the stuff that Barney Miller just got rid of. Yeah. But it's interesting sometimes. But I kind of think of the two because, we talked about how, cops always say Barney Miller was one of the most realistic shows, which is interesting. You might assume it would be something like Hill Street Blues, which it seems very realistic in its way. Yeah. With some of these stylized elements, but I think the two shows are not dissimilar. Hill Street Blues and Barney Miller, and especially the Ferrello character and Barney. They're both kind of the centers of I like the way you put it. There's all this chaos going around them, and they remain calm and kind of the voice of reason throughout everything that's going on.
Yeah, and I think Faye, as contrived as that can be sometimes, she's part of that chaos and seeing him sort of because often she's showing up at very inopportune moments, right, in the middle of some huge crisis. Yeah. As far as this episode, I guess we should also mention that there's a character named Sonny Crockett.
Yes.
Who gets killed.
Yeah.
And so he had been in a few episodes before this, and there was a thing, I forget what he got arrested for, but he was in a holding cell. Coffee and other cops had arrested this guy who was on angel dust. And during the arrest, Coffee did a chokehold on him. And then he ended up in the cell next to Sonny Crockett, who is a very large biker. Yes. He's not the Sonny Crockett we know and love.
No.
And Coffee goes and sees the guy in the cell. I think he feels a little bad, and he gives him some clothes because he didn't have a shirt on. And then sometime in between, and then Crockett gets released, but sometime in between that time, this guy is murdered. And it turns out Sonny Crockett did it, but he's ready to testify that Coffee did it. And of course, people get riled up in the community. The guy is black. And Crockett, Davenport's his public defender, but then he admits that he's going to perjure himself in front of the grand jury. And as an officer of the court, she has to. And he also admits that he killed the guy. And so she tells the DA, I can't continue to be his lawyer. She can't tell him anything else, but she does tell him that. So after Crockett dies, I guess in one of the other episodes, that releases her from privilege, so they can clear up that Crockett did it, and that clears Coffey of any wrongdoing.
That explains for me like a lot of stuff that that I didn't really know.
Yeah, I didn't understand any of that either. Exactly. And it seemed like Crockett's barely in this episode, and then he gets shot. So he's working for Mouse Feldstein, the loan shark that Benedetto and Washington go to get to sell his paper, and Crockett attacks them and is drawing a gun, and Benedetto shoots him like 8 times. Yeah, probably 6 times, but
8 would be difficult.
Yeah,
I can say that I see the casting of Sonny Crockett, because you're talking about interracial tension and everything. Mm-hmm. That actor was Red Fox's co-star on the short Sanford series. Oh, in the early 80s, the post-Lamont version of Sanford.
Guess who played the prosecutor who was going to use his testimony in the grand jury? Gregory Sierra.
Oh, wow. Okay. All kinds of connections here.
Who, by the way, is in the Orson Welles movie Other Side of the Wind.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I sent you some surprising facts, and I forgot that one.
Wow. Gregory Sierra, who showed up early on Miami Vice.
There you go. Yeah.
So all of this is tied together.
It's all connected.
Yes, the rich history of NBC in the 70s and 80s.
Right.
And Orson Welles thrown in for good measure.
Yeah.
Orson Welles should have gotten a show in the 80s.
He should.
On NBC.
Didn't he have like a talk show pilot or something?
Oh, did he? I don't know.
I think he did. Yeah.
I could see him doing that.
I don't know for who, but
yeah. Do a little magic.
Yep.
Some chat, and some innovative cinematography.
Oh, I'm sure.
He brought it to you. He would have brought it to you every night at 12:30 after Carson.
The best looking talk show ever.
Yeah.
Deep Focus Talk Show.
Right. That'd be the name of the show. Deep Focus with Orson Welles.
This is Deep Focus. Anyway, at the end of the episode, Benedetto kills Mouse Feldstein. And we know for sure he's no good.
Yeah, he kills him not like in self-defense. He kills him in cold blood.
Yeah, it's
like
an assassination.
A bleeding mouse, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
And that leads to the other 2 episodes.
Yeah.
And Sal Benedetto's downfall.
Yeah, I'd strongly recommend that anybody, if you're interested and you want to watch this on Hulu or whatever, you'll probably want to check out the other 2 episodes.
I think so.
I think we're kind of talking about them as a whole a little bit, and talking about the series in general a little bit.
Yeah, and the Jonathan Banks story goes into the next episode, too. And the Rico story continues on and ends pretty much how you think it's going to end. And the robot plays a big role in Sal Benedetto's downfall.
Yeah, the robot story pretty much ends how you think it's going to end, too. I think it's fair to say.
The British guy story did not end how I thought it was going to end.
No, that was a little surprising.
Yeah.
To me and to the characters involved, I believe. The other characters involved, and at least one of them.
That was pretty botchko.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it's...
Again, a little broad.
It's like a little side thing that's not directly related to anything else that's going on, but it's been built up for a couple of episodes, and they kind of end on this like little kind of punchline. Yeah.
Anyway, clearly I'm very positive on this show.
Yeah.
It seems like you're mixed, but...
I'm less so. Maybe I'm just not as enthralled by it as maybe I just expect to be.
Yeah.
But again, I respect it, but I can't... I'm not really... I'm not as absorbed by it. However, I enjoy it, and I'm probably going to try to watch more episodes of it. I think maybe just from the beginning. It really strikes me as the kind of show that it gets better the more you watch it. With all the different characters and everything going on, I think it's probably... It might be better to kind of really get into it rather than just dip into it every now and then with like random episodes or something like that. Yeah.
I started out bouncing around, kind of looking for something, and part of the trouble we had is that there aren't singular episodes. That it is serialized, and I guess in the way we had that with Dynasty a little bit too, but it's very hard to find one thing, and it was hard to find any kind of like top 10 list even. And then the one I mentioned earlier from the beginning of this season, it felt like the subject matter was maybe a little heavy for our show, but it's definitely worth watching.
Yeah,
and certainly if you're a fan of David Milch, worth watching. And he and Jeffrey Lewis, not the actor, but this writer, Jeffrey Lewis, in the later seasons ran the show after Bochco got fired, which we talked about on our Bochco.
Yeah.
He got fired just because his other show was unsuccessful.
Yeah.
There might have been. I wonder if there was something else.
I don't know. But it's definitely an important series, and it's a quality series. I think that definitely stands out. There's some aspects of it that I'm not as impressed by it, but overall, yeah, I have a good deal of respect for it. I just don't know if it's not something that I'm hooked by right now.
Yeah, I'll give another shout out to this HillStreetBlues.net site. It has episode guides and that interview and a good rundown of most of the actors and a lot of the guest stars and some other stuff. The guy seems passionate about it.
Cool.
So,
I mean, I think that's, again, kind of growing up. I mean, I was a kid, but you could tell that Hill Street Blues did have a fervent following, and like the critics, the people that supported it, were really into it, and I can definitely see why.
Yeah, I definitely think it's worth giving a look, and if it doesn't do it for you, it doesn't do it for you. But I think, unlike some shows from that period, it doesn't feel slow.
Right.
Because there's just so much chaos, I think. And there's always something going on.
Yeah. You know what else? Not to, I'm going to disparage Hulu.
Yeah.
I think the commercials kind of kill the show a little bit. Because
that's part of my solution was.
Oh, okay.
Springing for the no commercial version.
Because it's interesting because I think the third episode of these three, for some reason, I was watching it the other day and it had very few, if any, commercials, and it took me a while to realize that. And this episode, they don't have all these commercial breaks in it. It was a little bit of a different experience, I have to say. Now, granted, when it aired, it had commercials, but still, in this day and age, some of these more prestige shows, we're watching them on DVR or on cable, and we don't have obnoxious commercial breaks that, not so much the commercial breaks themselves, but coming at 5-minute intervals sometimes kind of really kills the flow of the show.
Yeah. If you can splurge on the commercial-free Hulu, it definitely becomes a much better service.
Yeah, I certainly can see that.
Yeah. I don't think I could have made it through a whole season.
Yeah, well, just from a practical standpoint, that shaves 15 minutes off each episode probably.
Yeah, and rewatching this episode, I have to admit I fast-forwarded through at least one of the Rico scenes and the credits, which is the only time I did that because I love that theme song. Yeah. And I like the, not just the theme song, but there's a dispatcher at the beginning of it. And there's something about the way she delivers it that's also slightly melancholy. Yeah. Even though, it's the same thing every time. But it combined with that music just... I
think melancholy is a great word for the whole thing. Definitely is.
Yeah, melancholy, some broad humor, some black humor, some silly humor.
And some action.
Action, yeah, it's. I think that's the one area where it's maybe you can see the holdover of 70s cop shows. A lot of gunfights, a lot of car chases. Mike Post lays on the action music when that happens.
Yeah, I mean,
foot chases.
We're kind of focusing on the drama and the melodrama aspects, but really, there's quite a bit of gunplay and fights and action in the show too. Yeah, it's not just a totally talky cop show.
Right, Belker biting people.
Yeah.
Now, when Belker has his 5 o'clock shadow, do you take that to be actual 5 o'clock shadow or something for his undercover work? Because occasionally he'll have it and then I know he could just shave, but he'll go from that to being, other than his mustache, very clean shaven pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So that makes it occasionally in those times look like, something he's put on his face to dirty it up.
I hadn't thought of that. Yeah. My picture of that character is always with the 5 o'clock, the full 5 o'clock shadow, and that being part of the thing.
Yeah. I think he's probably hirsute, and
yes,
it just
that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't take him long to get that, but
right. And maybe his mom is the one that is always after him to shave.
But there are quite a number of mustaches on here.
This is true.
There's him. Goldblum has a mustache.
That's right. Yeah.
And Ray Caetano has a mustache.
Yes.
Might be someone else, but. Those are the three that stand out.
They do. Well, and I guess Dennis Franz.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Let's not take it for granted.
Yeah.
Yes. He's not a regular at this point, but,
right.
But makes an impression. Yeah, that might have been what saved the show in those early years, is the strong roster of mustaches. Probably didn't hurt.
Right.
When they're looking for excuses to renew it.
Uh-huh.
Give me something here. What about the mustaches?
They do have some good mustaches.
Yeah. Well, we can't let that go.
I think Goldblum shaves his later. Or his might come and go.
Now, Goldblum, so he was also like the bow ties, right?
Yes.
His character. Yeah,
he's the bow ties. I think one of his jobs is he's a negotiator.
Oh, okay.
And he's some sort of, I saw the word pacifist used.
Okay.
He's definitely I think was a hippie. Or maybe not a hippie, but a left.
More of a left, okay. Because like in that those first couple of episodes, he seems to be like being more of a mediator, but he seems like, I was a little confused about what his role was.
Yeah.
Like in the department even, because at first I thought he was like some kind of liaison, which maybe I guess he still could be, but I didn't even know that he was actually a lieutenant in the force for a little bit. He almost, because he was always there, but he seemed more like, I think it was part of the bow ties and everything. He looked more like a civilian or something.
Right, yeah. And he's some sort of confidant of Furlough's. Okay. Or has a relationship there. That's a weird place to end.
Mustaches, bow ties. Okay, so we got the important stuff out of the way.
A number of bald people.
Yeah.
Cayetano, Esterhazy.
Yeah.
Dennis Franz.
Yeah.
Not many glasses.
No, but Howard Hunter's got the glasses, which is good. It's a nice touch.
It's another thing he can be a little bit pretentious with.
Yeah, the aggressively macho right-winger. You wouldn't necessarily think that character would have glasses, but he does.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what else there is to say.
Well, I think we've shown what a rich and diverse array of characters Hill Street Blues has. We really hit it home the last couple of minutes.
Baldies.
By delving into
mustaches,
this.
Sometimes a bald person with a mustache.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another reason why the show was so groundbreaking.
Washington always has a toothpick.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. I mean, Kojak might have had a bald guy with a lollipop, but when you combine all these different things and different characters, it just provides such a richer experience.
Kojak didn't have a mustache.
True, exactly.
I bet Telly could have had it.
He could have pulled it off.
Oh, yeah.
He could have pulled it off. Now, George Savalas had some interesting hair going on, though.
Yeah.
You know, eventually when we get around to doing Kojak, we could talk about thematic issues and storylines and you know, the location shooting versus on sets, but I think we're going to have to delve into the hair.
Yeah.
And the mustaches.
Hallmarks of cop shows.
Yes. Exactly.
Well, I think on that note, we can put this one to rest.
Sounds good to me.
Or maybe it'll be serialized until the next one.
You just have to.
This mustache conversation is a thread that runs throughout Battle of the Network shows.
Yes, tune in next week.
Where would it
hear where we go with this?
Yeah.
This episode brought to you by Rico. This episode also brought to you by Sal Benedetto brand pliers. Tighten a bolt, squeeze a nose. This episode also brought to you by Joyce Davenport, attorney at law. Don't call her mommy. Join us next time for another exciting episode of Battle of the Network shows. Learn more, leave feedback, and suggest future episodes at battleofthenetworkshows.com. Follow us on Twitter at BatNetShows and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Battle of the Network shows.
Butterfly, caterpillar, giraffe, hopscotch, noodle, underwear,
Is somebody listening to us right now?